After we imported our pictures and got the selection of the ones we want to edit, we will be starting with the editing process. At first, a small shortcut, because we will be starting with the basic module and then get into the colors and so on. And normally you will make changes at the end again in the basic or in the colors. So if you start with the basics and then you get into the colors and then into the split toning and then into the lens correction and then into the transform module and then into the effects, all modules are opened up and we have to scroll all the way up to the basic module. If you click the right mouse tab and then click solo mode, only one is opened up. If we click on color, basic is closed and color is open. So that's a way that you can access quicker the different modules. So we will start with the basics and at first the white balance adjustment. At first we have to set the temperature of the photo. If we pull it to the left, we'll get more blue colors and a colder feeling to it. If we push it to the right side, it gets more warm with more yellow colors. If you double click on the arrow, it will be reset to default. So we have here a picture on the beach with a nice sunset, so we want a bit more warm colors. So we want to express the typical beach feeling. So we will be going more into the yellow colors. If you pull the cursor to the right hand side over the numbers, so you can see the cursor switches into a hand, and then by clicking on it and holding the mouse tab and sliding to your left or your right, you can make more accurate adjustments than using the normal slider. So we were going a bit into warm colors, maybe like this, and doing afterwards the tint. This is nearly the same, but it applies to the green and magenta colors. Double click on it, we reset it, and we want to have a bit more of the purple magenta colors because of the sunset. So I again go to the right hand side and pull it a bit more to the right side, but we have to be careful that there is no unnatural feeling to it. So I think, yeah, -10 was better, and we were staying with this. All the changes we did in Lightroom, we can access later on again and are able to change it. So if you don't like it later on, you can change it at any time. Okay, next up is the exposure. If our picture was too dark, we can brighten it up, or if it was too bright, we can darken it. If you go to the histogram and click on the small arrows on the left and to the right, Lightroom gives you an overview if there are too dark or too bright parts in this picture where no details left. For example, here on the branches, there are some blue areas. Lightroom colors all the dark parts in blue so that we can see that they are too dark in this photo. If we click on the left arrow again, they will be removed. The same applies to the bright areas. They are normally colored in red, but we don't have any burnt out areas so that there are no red areas. You can zoom into a picture simply by clicking on it, and by clicking on it again, you will be able to zoom out. If you're zoomed in into a picture and click on the left mouse and hold it, then you can move it. If you press the space bar or just click one time, it will zoom out again. So exposure, I think there's nothing to change here. And contrast, we won't be touching right now. This will be applied later on. But we will have to talk about the highlights. Highlights are the bright areas in the pictures, for example, the sky. And we want a nice sky with the colors, and they are more vivid if they are a bit darker. So we pull the highlight slider a bit down. This expresses the colors a bit more. We do the opposite with the shadows, so we brighten them up a little bit. And as you can see, right here on the branch, For example, this is before and then this is after. There are no changes made to the sky, only to the dark areas if we are touching the shadows. So bringing the highlights down and open up the shadows. In portrait shootings, there's often a nicer look if you open up the shadows and bring down the highlights so that you have a more centered look on the photo and to the areas that are already bright, and darken up the not so dark pictures so that you have a focus. But in landscape photography, we want everything seen, everything in focus. So we bring down the highlights and open up the shadows. But the technique that the bright areas have to be brought a little bit down and the dark areas have to brighten up a little bit, that's something we change in the highlights and in the shadows. Same applies to the whites. If I pull the whites to the right hand side, they become brighter, and the blacks, if I pull it to the left, they become darker. So that there's a basic contrast adjustment already in the picture. I will be pulling the whites a little bit to the right and the blacks a little bit down. And we will only be doing some subtle changes, not too extreme, but by doing subtle changes it will add up, and in the end you have a totally different result. Next up is clarity. Clarity is a micro contrast that expresses a bit more the details. That's a nice look in landscape photos, especially if you have areas with texture, like the branches right here. But you have to be careful because it causes a lot of noise. So clarity, bring up, but not more than 15. Dehaze is a little bit a mix of contrast and saturation, so this brings a nice look, but also you have to be careful with that. So we would be really careful. Yeah, and maybe plus 16. Yeah, that looks good. Maybe you already noticed it. Here we got more blue areas right here because it brings contrast to the picture. After you saw that, maybe you can open up the shadows a little bit more so that you get a more even exposure. In the basic module left is the saturation and vibrance. Saturation saturates the saturated colors, and vibrance saturates the not so much saturated colors in this picture. Saturation often gets an unnatural look. I can show you this. Yeah, that doesn't look like a really natural sunset, but vibrance does. So we will be always using vibrance. Bring it up only a little bit. Saturation adjustment in the color tab next. So we're done with the basics. By pressing Y on your keyboard, you can see a before and after. And I think that already looks quite good. And for some, this might be already enough, but we want to edit our pictures like a pro. So we will be talking about all the other different modules in the next videos.